My name is Emily. If you had asked me a year ago what love looked like, I would have said warm eyes, soft hands, and the sound of laughter on rainy days. That was before everything changed. I met Mark on the second week of September. I remember the date because it was just after my birthday, and I had promised myself that 24 would be the year I focused on work and nothing else. No boys, no distractions. But life doesn't always follow the promises we make to ourselves. Mark walked into the bookstore where I worked just after lunch. He was tall, wore a gray sweater, and looked like he hadn't slept much. He picked up a novel, flipped through the first few pages, then looked up and caught me watching him. "Is this one any good?" he asked, holding up the book. I shrugged. "The ending is a little sad." He smiled. "Sometimes sad is exactly what I need." I don't know what it was about that moment, but it stayed with me long after he left. The next day he came back. This time he didn't ask for book recommendations. He asked for my name. "Emily," I said. "I'm Mark," he replied. "Nice to meet you, Emily who likes sad endings." From there, it became a pattern. He'd stop by every couple of days, sometimes pretending to browse, sometimes just standing at the counter and talking to me. We'd chat about everything: music, food, the weird things people say when they think no one's listening. He was funny, but not the kind of funny that tries too hard. He was the kind that made you feel like laughing just came naturally when you were around him. One evening when I was closing up the shop, he waited for me outside. "Do you need a walk home?" he asked. "I'm okay," I replied, but I didn't really want him to go. "Still," he said, "I'll walk with you, just in case the world gets funny." That night we walked slowly through the quiet streets. The streetlights flickered above us, and our shadows stretched across the pavement. He told me about his childhood, how his mother used to read to him every night. I told him how I always wanted to be a writer, but never really believed I could. He looked at me and said, "You already are one, you just don't know it yet." That sentence stayed in my heart. A few weeks later, we were spending almost every day together. Coffee in the morning, long walks after work, movie nights with cheap popcorn and old DVDs. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was quiet and soft. And it felt safe. Too safe, maybe. Looking back now, I wonder if it was always a little too perfect. If maybe I ignored the signs. The way he sometimes looked away when I asked personal questions. The way his phone would ring and he'd silence it without checking who it was. But I didn't ask too many questions, because I was falling for him. Fast. And for the first time in a long time, I thought someone might actually catch me. The first sign was sleep. I was always tired, bone-deep tired, the kind of tired that made my body feel heavy, even after a full night's rest. I thought maybe it was stress. I'd been working longer shifts at the bookstore and trying to write again during late nights. I even joked to Mark that I might be getting old. "You," he laughed, "you're 24. You're in your prime." But behind my smile, something didn't feel right. Then came the headaches, the nausea, the strange feeling that my body was no longer just mine. One morning, I stood in the kitchen staring at a boiled egg and suddenly ran to the sink to throw up. I hadn't eaten yet. The smell alone had turned my stomach. I stood there, holding the edge of the counter, heart pounding. A small voice inside whispered what I didn't want to hear. "What if you're pregnant?" I shook my head quickly. No, it couldn't be. Mark and I were careful most of the time. And it was too early for that, wasn't it? We'd only been together a few months. But doubt crept in like water through a crack in the wall, quiet but steady. That evening, I went to the pharmacy. I avoided eye contact with the cashier as she handed me the test. I walked home slowly, the box tucked deep inside my bag like a secret. I didn't take the test that night. I kept it on my nightstand, unopened, while I stared at the ceiling in the dark. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I was just overthinking. Maybe my body was reacting to stress, or bad food, or a late period. But the next morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. I closed the bathroom door, hands shaking as I unwrapped the test. I followed the instructions like a robot. Pee, wait, breathe, 2 lines. I stared at them in silence. The world didn't spin. My heart didn't race. It was just still, pregnant. The word felt too big for the small bathroom I stood in. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and stared at my feet. Was this real? Was this really happening to me? I should have cried, but no tears came. Instead, I placed my hand gently on my belly, almost without thinking. "Hi," I whispered. "It's just me and you for now. I didn't call Mark right away. I didn't know how to say it." I kept imagining the conversation in my head, but every version sounded awkward and wrong. Would he be happy? Scared? Would he leave? No, he wouldn't leave. Mark was kind. He cared. He said he saw a future with me. He said I was the most important thing that had ever happened to him. So why did my chest feel so tight? Later that night, we sat on his couch watching an old movie. I rested my head on his shoulder, trying to find the right moment. He rubbed my arm and laughed at something on screen, but I barely heard it. I was too busy listening to the storm inside my own thoughts. "I need to talk to you," I whispered. He turned to me, brows raised. "What's wrong?" I opened my mouth and closed it again. "Not now," I said quickly. "Later." He kissed my forehead and said, "Okay, whenever you're ready." But something had already shifted. I could feel it, like a quiet space growing between us that neither of us had noticed before. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last normal evening we ever shared. That morning started like any other. The sun poured softly through the curtains, casting warm light across the room. But inside me, the calm was already slipping away. I had finally decided it was time to tell Mark. I couldn't carry this secret any longer, not alone. The baby growing inside me deserved more than whispered hopes and silent fears. I found him in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. His usual calm was there, but something in his eyes seemed distant. "Mark," I said, voice trembling. "I'm pregnant." He froze. The phone slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the floor. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. "Pregnant?" he repeated, like he wasn't sure he'd heard right. "Yes," I said, stepping closer. "I didn't want to surprise you like this, but you needed to know." He ran a hand through his hair, his face shadowed with confusion and something else, fear, maybe. I don't know what to say," he murmured. "This changes everything." I nodded slowly, trying to find strength in his words. "I'm scared too," I whispered, but then Mark's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it quickly, and suddenly his face hardened. "I have to go," he said abruptly. "Wait, what?" "Mark, we need to talk," but he was already heading for the door. "I'll call you," he said without looking back. Days passed. I waited for his call, replaying our last conversation over and over. But no call came, no message, nothing. I tried reaching out, texts, calls, but every time silence. It felt like I had been erased from his world. The months that followed were some of the hardest of my life. I had no choice but to face the pregnancy alone without Mark's support. I had to learn how to be strong for two. Friends offered help when they could. My mother, though shocked, stood by me. Every doctor's appointment, every sleepless night, every kick and flutter from inside my belly, those moments became mine and mine alone. When Hope was born, her tiny fingers wrapped tightly around mine, I knew I had made it through the storm. She was my light. Years passed. Hope grew into a bright, kind girl, full of curiosity and dreams bigger than the sky. She worked hard in school, determined to make a better life. I watched her graduate school with honors, tears of pride spilling down my cheeks. And then the day came, her college convocation. Hope stood tall, wearing the cap and gown, her smile radiant. As I clapped and cheered among the crowd, I thought about everything we had overcome, the loneliness, the pain, the silence from the man who left. Mark had never come back, never reached out, never asked, but it didn't matter. Hope was my victory, and as she held her diploma high, I whispered quietly, "You are everything I hoped for, and more."